Hey everybody, welcome to our Bible study in Genesis. We're in chapter 30 tonight. We're really rolling right on through this. Okay, again, it's a great book. It's a lot of excitement. It's an easy read. It can get kind of confusing sometimes. Tons of names. And this is the names chapter, by the way. You're going to get hit with more names tonight and meanings behind the names, and you can.
Some of them I couldn't even pronounce.
Yep. Naphtali, Naphtali. So that kid and that kid, But this is a names chapter, and it's, again, we've talked about how many children we're all from. We have in our family and stuff like that. And I come from a family of 6. And after a while, my poor mother, which she, like any mother, would start calling out after you. Mom, no, I'm not Fred, I'm Mark.
Yeah.
She said, that's it. I'm just, absolutely. Well, Gail's got 3 kids. She still gets them confused. All right, it's pretty bad when she calls the boy one of the girls' names. But other than that, no. So after a while, my mother just started calling us by number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
That's easy.
And so we can't blame her. But tonight, we're talking 12 boys from 4 different women.
I still get confused with my daughter and my granddaughter because there's so much light that sometimes I'm talking and it's just like, who you talking to, Mom? Oh, that's right, too. I'm talking to you and I'm calling you Pam and Pam.
But that's a big deal that happens tonight. We're talking lots of names. Got to tell you that we're actually going to do one of the daughters' names. Very unusual. Whenever you see that, you got to say there's something else coming then. All right, when we talk about Dinah. But before we get started, let's go ahead and do our review. We're working our way through the patriarchs. Jacob, whose name is going to change here real soon, Jacob is the 3rd patriarch. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Abraham married to Sarah. Isaac married to Rebekah. But Jacob has 2 wives. Their names are what?
Leo and Rebecca.
Leah and Rebecca's mother. Rachel. Right. Rachel. Okay. So Rebecca was married to Isaac and is Jacob's mom. So Leah and Rachel. If you remember, wait a minute, how'd that happen? How the heck did Jacob wind up with 2 wives?
Because he
the oldest daughter over him first.
Right. Remember, Laban is the uncle, the father of Leah and Rachel, and
he married the oldest one, but he was in love with the youngest one.
Correct, but why did he wind up? How did he wind up marrying Leah?
Because the oldest one goes first.
The older one has to go first.
Even though he wanted the younger one,
right.
The older one had to go first.
Isaac says, Jacob says, "Give me my wife," and Laban does. Again, I think it was because they had a little too much fun at the festival. All right, he comes back to his tent. There's a woman in the dark, probably veiled. He lays with her and wakes up next morning and finds out it's Leah, not Rachel. And so, remember, he had to work how many years for Leah? 7 years. So what's the deal for Rachel? 7 more years. 7 more years. 14 years.
It's a drop in the bucket.
Why was it a drop in the bucket for Jacob?
Because that's what he wanted.
He was deeply in love with Rachel.
Plus, it's a drop in the bucket age-wise because these people live so long.
Oh, well, that's actually, they're getting down closer, now they're close to about 100 years. So, I know, I understand. But the Bible says that it was very easy for Jacob because he loved Rachel so much that the time went by very quickly, like days, the Bible says, like days. All right. That love is also going to cause problems. Right? Let's think about this for a few minutes. Why doesn't God allow, polygamy? How's that for a deep question?
Why doesn't he allow what?
Polygamy. Multiple wives.
Multiple wives?
Jealousy.
We're going to look into right tonight. There's going to be jealousy amongst the wives. These are sisters. And we're going to have deep jealousy between them, or envy as we were using the word. We're going to see that. That's one of the reasons why. Going back to the very beginning of Genesis, why?
That's where it all started from, with Abraham.
Right. Well, before him, at the time of Adam and Eve, God talks about what the man and the woman are supposed to do when they come together. Supposed to become one. Right? This goes back to one of my favorite rock songs. I've always told Gail this. The Who has always prepared me for my wife. And in this one song, called Bargain. Peter Townsend, he's the lead guitarist and the writer for the rock group The Who. All right, long when he was still a young man, wrote this line. He's in The Who. Again, now we're getting to one of my favorite things. When a Who song comes on the radio, I ask my children, "Do you know who this is?" And they go, "Who?" I say, "Correct."
They don't know if they can bring us the right answer.
They have no idea, but that's one of the reasons I set it up that way, so they can get the right answer, just like that. In the song Bargain, Peter Townsend writes this line: "In life, 1 and 1 don't make 2, 1 and 1 makes 1. And I'm looking for that free ride to me. I'm looking for you." God shows that eventually a very important institution to him is going to be best reflected by marriage. Marriage is the oldest institution. Eventually, Christ, upon his death, burial, and resurrection, would begin something that we studied in the last book we studied. We studied the book of Acts. In the book of Acts, what is born?
The church.
The church. And in there, Paul teaches that the church's relationship with Jesus Christ is similar to the bride and the bridegroom. Christ is the groom, the church is the bride. And he talks about that relationship. And that a marriage should reflect, or actually that the church's relationship to Christ should reflect the marriage. That love affair, that commitment to each other, that one relationship. Very important. Another reason why God does not favor polygamy. He allows it.
Yeah,
All right? But he doesn't favor it.
a favorite.
And despite sin, he will still fulfill his promises. Okay? All right. Any questions before we get into the names chapter? All right. So let's begin. So we're in Genesis chapter 30. And this is a lot of reading, so hang in there. And I'll begin in 1. But a lot happens. And there's a lot of stuff here that's kind of confusing that I'll go over. In verse 1, when Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she became jealous of her sister. So Rachel said to Jacob, "Give me children or I'll die." Don't forget that. Don't forget that. Jacob became angry with her and said, "Am I in the place of God who has kept you from having children?" Then she said, "Here is Bilhah, my maidservant. Sleep with her so that she can bear children for me, and that through her I too can build a family." Again, I've said it many times before. I'll say it again. Sound familiar? It gets worse. So she gave him her servant Bilhah as a wife. Jacob slept with her, and she became pregnant and bore him a son. Then Rachel said, "God has vindicated me. He has listened to my plea and given me a son." Because of this, she named him Dan. Rachel's servant Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, "I have had a great struggle with my sister, and I have won." So she named him Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had stopped having children, she took her maidservant Zilpah, not to be confused with Bilhah, all right? So there's Bil and Zil, all right? And gave her to Jacob as a wife. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, "What good fortune." So she named him Gad. In verse 12. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, "How happy am I? The women will call me happy." So she named him Asher. During the wheat harvest, Reuben, remember, Reuben's the oldest son, born of Leah, the first son born. Reuben went out into the fields and found some mandrake plants, which he brought to his mother Leah. Rachel said to Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." But Leah said to Rachel, "Wasn't it enough that you took away my husband? Will you take my son's mandrakes too?" "Very well," Rachel said, "he can sleep with you tonight." I'm going to slip over this way a little bit and make room here for Sherry. Oh, honey, no, come in. You got to come over and sit with us. Sherry. Sherry.
Brings it back to the rub your shoulder just like that.
That's an extra thing, ma'am. Throw it in. All right. All right. Do you have your Bible? You sure do. Yep. I think she's all set.
That's okay. I got a good spot.
And she's
Nice and
just
tight.
going to lean on Kay and make yourself comfortable. So we've just started reading. We're in Genesis chapter 30, and I'm going back now. I'm in verse 16. So when Jacob came in from the fields that evening, Leah went out to meet him. "You must sleep with me," she said. "I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." So he slept with her that night. God listened to Leah, and she became pregnant and bore Jacob a fifth son. Then Leah said, "God has rewarded me for giving my maidservant to my husband." So she named him Issachar. Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a sixth son. All right, so time is really flying by here, right? Okay, we got years going by. Look, Reuben's old enough to go out in the fields and bring in, plants. So Leah conceived again. All right, God has presented me with a precious gift. This time my husband will treat me with honor because I have borne him 6 sons. So she named him Zebulun. Sometime later, she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah. Then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and opened her womb. So obviously she was pleading with God. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son and said, "God has taken away my disgrace." She named him Joseph. And said, "May the Lord add to me another son." Notice no one said that before. Just remember those 2 things that Rachel says. Let me bear children or I'll die. And then may God give me another son. Verse 25. After Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me on my way." So here he is talking with his uncle. "So I can go back to my own homeland." Remember, that was the original promise. That was God's promise too to him. "Give me my wives and children for whom I have served you, and I will be on my way. You know how much work I've done for you." But Laban said to him, "If I have found favor in your eyes, please stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you." He added, "Name your wages, and I will pay them." Jacob said to him, "You know how I have worked for you, and how your livestock has fared under my care. The little you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I've been. But now, when may I do something for my own household?" Verse 31. "What shall I give you?" he asked. "Don't give me anything," Jacob replied. "But if you will do this one thing for me, I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them. Let me go through all your flocks today and remove from them every speckled or spotted sheep, every dark-colored lamb, and every spotted or speckled goat. They will be my wages, and my honesty will testify for me in the future, whenever you check on the wages you have paid me. Any goat in my possession that is not speckled or spotted, or any lamb that is not dark-colored, will be considered stolen." "Agreed," said Laban. "Let it be as you have said." That same day, Laban, watch this, Laban removed all the male goats that were streaked or spotted. Remember, those are the ones that Jacob had just said he'll take. So Laban removes all the ones that are streaked or spotted, and all the speckled or spotted female goats, all that had white on them, and all the dark-colored lambs, and he placed them in the care of his sons. Then he put a 3-day journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob continued to tend the rest of Laban's flocks. Jacob, however, took fresh-cut branches from poplar, almond, and plane trees, made white stripes on them by peeling the bark and exposing the white inner wood of the branches. Then he placed the peeled branches in all the watering troughs so that they would be directly in front of the flocks when they came to drink. When the flocks were in the heat and came to drink, they mated in front of the branches. And they bore young that were speckled or spotted. Jacob set apart the young of the flock by themselves, but made the rest face the streaking dark-colored animals that belonged to Laban. Thus he made separate flocks for himself and did not put them with Laban's animals. Whenever the stronger females were in heat, Jacob would place the branches in the troughs in front of the animals so they would mate near the branches. But if the animals were weak, he would not place them there. So the weak animals went to Laban, and the strong ones to Jacob. In this way, the man grew exceedingly prosperous and came to own large flocks and maidservants and menservants and camels and donkeys. All right, we can take this apart now. That's an awful lot. But they're just cheating the heck out of each other.
You're having a book.
Yep, this is just...
This one's wife is with that one.
Oh, yeah, this is...
Having kids.
I told you, this is God's soap opera, okay? It just keeps on going.
That wasn't allowed.
Well, see, remember, the law hasn't been given yet.
Yeah.
The law has not been given yet. Moses is the lawgiver. He comes 500 years later.
Yeah.
And that's when we get Deuteronomy, Leviticus, and Numbers. And that's the law. All right? Which is the reason why we have laws today. In fact, we call the United States a country of laws, not of men. And so that we can all count on how we're going to be treated because we have laws. So that's what God does with Moses, and Moses is called the lawgiver. So these rules were understood. There were rules that were understood, but it's not like how we see things today.
No.
There's no strong elements of what is right and wrong yet. So hence the reason why these practices are so common. There's a lot of funny stuff in this chapter. And we can, like I said, we can take it apart right now. So let's go back to verse 1. Remember, Rachel is the one that's loved by Jacob. She's the favored wife. When Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she became jealous of her sister. If you remember, her sister's already had a couple of kids.
Yep.
All right? And that's just the boys that we know of. All right, let's go back and see. We're in chapter 29. We're in verse 31. When the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben. For she said, it is because the Lord has seen my misery. Surely my husband will love me now. And pretty much that's what the word Reuben means. Now the Lord has seen. 33. She conceived again, and when she gave birth to her son, she said, because the Lord heard me that I am not loved, he gave me this one too. So she named him Simeon. 34. Again she conceived, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, now at last my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. So he named him Levi. And we talked a little bit about who the Levites will be, speaking of the law. All right, they'll be the high priests. She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, this time I will praise the Lord. So she named him Judah, which means praise, by the way. Then she stopped having children. So she's up 4-0 over Rachel, if you allow the baseball metaphor. All righty? So Rachel's desperate. She just calls it Conrad humor. Watch the statement. When Rachel saw, this is verse 1 of chapter 30. When Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she became jealous of her sister. So she said to Jacob, listen to this. She turns to her husband and says, give me children or I'll die. Okay, now first of all, that's a prophecy. You'll see it later on. Okay. Jacob is angry with this. All right. Am I in the place of God who has kept you from having children? I mean, who do you think I am? I hate to tell you this, Jacob. You're one of the patriarchs of God. Okay, it is your grandfather, who God blessed and called out of Ur of the Chaldeans to do all this. I mean, your God has done unbelievably amazing things. How about praying for me? And that might mean something, but that's not included. That's all me adding it. But that, if I was Rachel, that's what I'd be thinking. So then Rachel says, okay, you're not going to give me any help. All right, I'm on my own here, so I'll decide. I blame Jacob for this. All right. Then she said, here is Bilhah, my maidservant. Sleep with her so that she can bear children for me, and that through her I too can build a family. We all know where this is from. We remember this from Abraham and Sarah. All right? Sarah did the same thing. Gave him Hagar to Abraham. Eventually bore Ishmael. Unfortunately, Jacob takes it. But then again, who knows? So she gave him his servant Bilhah. In verse 6, then Rachel said, God has vindicated me. Ooh. What does the word vindicate mean to you?
Proved.
Proved. Or proved, right?
Approved.
Yeah, but I want vindication. What does that mean?
Proof of something?
More like slowed her down.
I want to be vindicated. I want justice.
Revenge.
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 Yeah. I want to be proven that I am right. That I am right with God. Says, remember, we talked about this. We talked about this before we get started. A woman today has many ways to be identified. All right? We have, we may be having a woman president here real soon. We already have women who are Supreme Court justices, run major corporations. Women today do not simply identify themselves as mothers. In these days, that was it. All right? That was it. A woman's identity was in her maternity. That's why it was so important. And that's the way it would be for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. A woman was identified by the number of children she could bear, specifically sons. So it's very, very different today. But in this day, now she's vindicated. She's not really vindicated. This is a lie she's living. But that's what she's saying. And you can see the emotion she has and the anger she has towards her sister. And this is horrible. Okay. Well, that's because of Laban's sin, first of all. And then you can see the other problem. Remember, Laban tricked Jacob. Verse 7. We can just move it back. Then Rachel said, God has vindicated me. He has listened to my plea and given me a son. Because of this, she named him Dan. God has heard. Verse 7. Rachel's servant Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. All right. Then Rachel said, I have a great struggle with my sister and I have won. See, it's a contest now. So she named him Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had stopped having children, she took her maidservant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, what good fortune. So she named him Gad. By the way, what's the score?
That guy lost track.
All right, so it's like 5-1, right?
I think so. I don't
All right. Well, no, Bilhah's had two kids, right? She's had, then Rachel said, God has vindicated. That's Dan. All right. And then Bilhah says the second one. Six is Naphtali. So that's how many Rachel has, right? Leah's had 4 by herself, right? And now she's got, she throws Zilpah into this. Zilpah bores Gad. And then Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, how happy I am. The woman will call me happy. So she named him Asher. So that's 6. So it's 6-2.
Yep.
All right. Verse 14. All right. So we pause. Everything pauses. And we shift the story from the maternity element. Verse 14. During wheat harvests, Reuben went out into the fields and found some mandrake plants, which he brought to his mother Leah. All right, so this is, Reuben now, the oldest, is old enough to be out working in the fields. And he brings back these special plants. By the way, these plants are considered to be good for maternity, to help a woman bear children. So that's the reason why Rachel says to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. How's that for irony? The woman she's trying to beat out as far as bearing children, she's asking for her help now. But Leah responds in verse 15, but she said to her, wasn't it enough that you took away my husband? Wake up, Leah. The whole point was for him to marry Rachel. It's not his fault. It's not her fault either. Very well, Rachel said. Jacob can sleep with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes. Giving Leah an opportunity to get pregnant again. Well, who knows? Rachel may think that she's already done. She's not going to bear any more children. Not the case. Verse 16. So when Jacob came in from the fields that evening, Leah went out to meet him. You must sleep with me, she said. I have hired you. Wow. I have hired you?
I hired you. She hired him.
So I paid to have you sleep with me
It's
tonight.
her husband.
Yes. You see, I have this over you now. All right? I have hired you with my son's mandrakes. So he slept with her that night. 17. God listened to Leah, and she became pregnant and bore Jacob a 5th son. All right? Then Leah said, God has rewarded me for giving my maidservant to my husband, so she named him Issachar. 19. Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a 6th son. Then Leah said, God has presented me with a precious gift. This time my husband will treat me with honor, because I have borne him 6 sons. So she named him Zebulun. It's so sad. This is how she's getting her husband's attention and his love. is by bearing all these sons. She thinks. She thinks. Exactly right. 21. Sometime later, she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah. You don't find out tonight why that's mentioned here. You will find out in about a month and a half from now, unless you want to read ahead. Verse 22.
They didn't have too many daughters, did they?
No, they had lots of daughters. They had many, many, many daughters. It was just not a part of his story. The his story. The history. His story. Okay? It's openly sexist. Let's just get it on the table. It is openly sexist. It is focused on men. All right? It's because men are just so much physically stronger than women. That's the reason why men dominate throughout history. And the reason why it's not the case today. All right? Physical strength no longer matters unless we're talking sports. Okay? Women drive big semi-trucks right now. Say again?
Or the Marine Corps.
Yeah, or the Marine Corps.
What was it on 60 Minutes yesterday?
So in between all these kids, there's a female babies being born too.
Tons. There are probably more girls than there are boys.
Okay.
All right, there probably are. Yeah, but that's, I guess, the military as well.
Yeah.
All right, but we have
That's
women.
when the
we have
concubines
women.
come in.
Yeah, yes. So that's what we're seeing at this point here. This battle through maternity for Jacob's affections. All right, because this is how a woman is identified. All right, so now we're down to verse 22. Then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her, so she was obviously praying, and opened her womb. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son. And she said, God has taken away my disgrace. Oh, that's such an important verse, considering who she's giving birth to.
Joseph.
Who's going to experience disgrace over and over again, including from his own family. We'll read about this. This is why Genesis ends so wonderfully. Remember, for my wife, right? We've talked about this a number of times. My poor wife, I keep picking on her about this. But there's only one thing I can guarantee if she's going to like a movie. What does it have to have?
A happy ending.
And Genesis has a great ending. Okay?
You can't get ahead of yourself now.
No, but I wanted everybody to get the sense of where we're going with this. This is a very important verse to look at. Okay? All right, God has taken away my disgrace. And then when we read about Joseph, I'm going to constantly come back to this and talk about disgrace. And the way Joseph not only is treated by his own family, but when he goes down to Egypt, how he's treated down there. Despite the fact that he's a pre-type of Jesus Christ himself. Joseph let me pause. Let's just have some fun with this and then we'll get back into this. Everybody's heard of the book and the movie, all right, To Kill a Mockingbird. All right? No one can probably tell me what that term means. It's okay. Don't worry about it. This goes all the way back to your high school English classes when you probably read To Kill a Mockingbird. Okay? All right. In the book, okay, the main character is a lawyer. And Gregory Peck plays him in the movie. And he's defending a black man who's been falsely accused by a white woman of raping her. Okay? And so the problem is this black man, and there's another person in the story as well, does nothing but nice things for everybody, including for this young lady. He was helping her. He was actually in her home. He was helping her at her request. All right? And then in order to protect herself, she blames him instead of blaming the man that actually, took advantage of her. He eventually dies. He's killed. Okay? First of all, he's found guilty, and then eventually on his way to prison, he's killed. All right? In the book, it explains what this is. The main character, okay, has children, and one of his sons got a BB gun, and he warns the son because he wants to go out and shoot birds. He said, you can shoot the blue jays, you can shoot almost any bird you want, because most of them are troublemakers, but you can never shoot a mockingbird. You can never kill a mockingbird, because they only do good. Okay? Just keep that in the back of your mind when we get to read about Joseph. Okay? All right.
God chooses the foolish things in life to confound the wise.
Exactly right.
I was thinking about that, why he quit the other husbands first, and then Rachel couldn't get pregnant. He couldn't marry her first because God had a plan. If he would have married Rachel, he wouldn't even thought about those others.
Yep.
He would have stuck with Rachel and said, I'm good. And
Yeah. We still get the 12 tribes of Israel through all
this. I
this.
was thinking about that, because
Yep.
God conformed
Right.
the...
And-
God, all their ways, they couldn't see that.
And we talked about this last week. it's still, even though Joseph becomes the great one coming through all of this,
Suffered
it's
too.
not through that line
No.
that we get King David and Jesus. It's through Judah's line.
Wow.
All right, through Judah's line. So that's Leah. All right, so it's very interesting. Okay, how God chooses to bless all of mankind. So again, verse 24. She named him Joseph and said, "May the Lord add to me another son." Like I said, keep that in mind. That's actually, along with the other one she mentions, that's actually a prophecy. Verse 25. After Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, so now the story shifts again. Now, this is going on between Jacob and Laban. "Send me on my way so I can go back to my own homeland. Give me my wives and children for whom I have served you, and I will be on my way. You know how much work I've done for you." But Laban said to him, wait a minute, I think this is too good of a deal. Things are really working out well for Laban. All right? He doesn't want to let Jacob leave. All right? He's just making too much money. Okay. "If I have found favor in your eyes," he says, "please stay. I have learned by divination." Does that sound familiar to you? Divination? What's divination? I remember this so well when I was a kid.
Divine things?
Yeah, well, divine things.
Divine things.
Yeah, divine. Remember, divine, the divine is God. God's the divine. But divination, I still remember this. A friend of my father, right, a wonderful guy, his last name, I just remember his last name being Blood. You can imagine as a kid, that's easy to remember. But I remember my father wanted to drill a well in the backyard. So we had this man, Blood, who was a Native American, come out and try to divine where the water was. So he takes a stick. All right, now everybody remembers that, right? And it's a Y, okay? And he's supposed to walk around the yard, and it's supposed to point down when they're over water. That's divination. Okay? It's kind of like magic.
Did you ever find the water?
No, there was no well in the backyard. All right? And so this is like using magic, all right, or sorcery or something that Laban says, "I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you." Well, you got that part right. He added, "Name your wages and I will pay them." Jacob said to him, "You know how I have worked for you and how your livestock have fared under my care." Oh, you better believe he knows. "The little you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I've been. But now, when may I do something for my own household?" So this sounds like Abraham. This sounds like Isaac. They too were able to increase dramatically other people, and then eventually made themselves. But now Jacob wants his own. Laban says, "What shall I give you?" he asked. "Don't give me anything," Jacob replied. "But if you will do this one thing for me, I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them. Let me go through all your flocks today and remove them, every speckled or spotted sheep, every dark-colored lamb, and every spotted or speckled goat. They will be my wages, and my honesty will testify for me in the future whenever you check on the wages you have paid me." Keep that in the back of your mind, too. Okay? "Any goat in my possession that is not speckled or spotted, or lamb that is not dark-colored, will be considered stolen." That's a pretty good system. Okay? If it's pure white or pure black, okay, they're yours. But if they got speckles or anything like that on them, they're mine. And we're all set. Verse 34. "Agreed," said Laban. "Let it be as you have said. However," watch this next line, "that same day Laban removed all the male goats that were streaked or spotted, and all the speckled or spotted female goats, all that had white on them, and all the dark-colored lambs, and he placed them in the care of his sons." So in other words, Jacob and Laban make this agreement. You keep all the ones that are pure black or pure white. I'll take all the other ones. So that later on, Laban goes and pulls all those ones out that are speckled that would have gone to Jacob and gives them to his sons, and then he moved 3 days away. But he couldn't take them all. So he leaves behind a certain number for Jacob to continue to take care of. Jacob doesn't throw what we say in Yiddish is a conniption fit.
Thanks.
Instead, he trusts God and watch what he does. Verse 37. Jacob, however, took fresh cut branches from poplar, almond, and plane trees and made white stripes on them by peeling the bark and exposing. He's doing the divination thing too. He's doing the superstitious thing also. He's taking bark and all kinds of stuff. Going to put it by the river, and then as the animals go down there, when they're in heat, they'll mate. The funny thing is, overwhelmingly, these animals continue to mate, to produce speckled or spotted offspring that would belong to Jacob. And even then on top of that, Jacob was able to take also the stronger ones and keep them from themselves. And as a result, God blessed him and all his animals increased. It's kind of like going to Vegas and just putting those nickels in and you keep bringing back tons and tons of more money. Verse 41. Whenever the stronger females were in heat, Jacob would place the branches in their troughs in the fronts of the animals so they could mate near the branches. But if the animals were weak, he would not place them there. So the weak animals went to Laban, and the strong ones to Jacob. In this way, the man grew exceedingly prosperous and came to own large flocks and maidservants and men servants and camels and donkeys. Well, he's got a family of 12 boys, so he's kind of need all the help he can
So
get.
scientifically, he knew that dye that was in that plant would automatically.
I don't know if that was the case. I really think it's more that he was thinking that he could take it in his own hands and do some kind of funny thing. There could be the possibility that that stuff drew the animals that were in heat closer to them. Who knows? All right? But the key is that God did bless him
Yeah.
powerfully.
Unless Joseph lost his memory, he already knew who Laban really was.
Oh, Jacob.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but Jacob already knew that if he did what he did before with the other stuff, that this was another screwy deal.
Yep.
But he didn't say nothing. He gets the best spot. This goes back to the other chapter.
Yeah, you're thinking about Lot.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
You know, you got all the spots.
Well,
Ba-dum,
Lot
king.
tried to take advantage of his uncle.
Yeah.
So, but really the uncle took advantage of him, cheated him, attempted to cheat him, but didn't realize he was dealing with God's man.
Exactly.
You know, again, this whole thing about God telling me that you have His favor, I don't think Laban had any clue
No.
of what was going on here.
Plus, in the beginning, the Bible says, told them to go and be fruitful and multiply. And if God would have went along with Rachel's plan, which he had already barren Rachel, he only would have had 2 kids in that. Be fruitful, multiply when it took place, but then he had all those other sons to multiply. Then he let the last one. Have
Jacob's the one that actually gets to see this all coming
That's
to
so awesome.
fruition. You know, not to be punny. Here he actually gets to see the nations.
That's so
All
awesome.
right, because that's what God's promise was.
Yeah.
From you would come many nations.
Yeah.
Here's the 12 tribes of Israel,
Oh,
who would now move into the diaspora and spread all over the world. Now, mind you, there are lots of other people being born on the earth, but this is the one that we're still talking about 5,000 years later. You know, we're still talking about this, and not so with all the other peoples. So, by the way, once again, as I said before, keep looking at this as though we're putting bricks into a foundation of another story. So much that we read tonight is set up for the next chapter. So much is set up. All right? The tension between Leah and Rachel. Okay? The tension between Laban and Jacob. Don't forget there's Jacob's brothers out there someplace.
Daddy will be coming
And he wants to kill him.
with 400 men.
How many chapters
Yeah,
you had? Were you like halfway through the Bible here or what?
So there's so much more to happen here. Remember, Jacob's asked his uncle if he can leave.
No.
And uncle's talked him out of it. But Jacob has got his other plans. Remember, the promise was that Jacob had made to God, you'll be my God, and as long as you return me back to my homeland. So Jacob is waiting on that promise too. And so there's a lot going on here. And this is setting up the whole stage for Joseph. So we get to see that precursor of Christ in Joseph. And of course, for those of us who studied Exodus, Joseph's death sets the stage for Moses. And this is the right time of year to be talking about Moses. Yeah, because we had to talk a lot more about him real soon, because we'll be talking about a Passover Seder. All righty? Questions and comments? All right. Everybody online, have a good time. We'll talk to you later.